Welcome everybody to the latest episode of the T3 Alpha Show. My name is Michael Comeau, and I am happy to introduce you to Debra Borchardt, who is a pioneer in the coverage of the cannabis universe. So Debra, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on the show, Michael.
Okay, so it seems like you took a very interesting turn in your career. You had what looked like a traditional financial journalism career, and you said, let me go into cannabis. So what made you move into the Wild West?
While I was at the street, I was covering financial news. I was covering, tech and consumer tech, a lot of different beats. But during that time, I did start covering cannabis stocks. And this was early days. This was before Colorado had even legalized adult use. And what I started seeing was what we could now call dodgy pot stocks. So these were companies that had literally zero connection to cannabis, and they were just throwing the name, of cannabis within the title of the company, and they were penny stocks, and the stocks would just blow up because people were like, oh my God, it's cannabis stock, when they really weren't. There were a bunch of con men and fraudsters, and but those stocks, were like original meme stocks, if you will, and they blew up. And I started looking at them, and I was like, this is kind of interesting. As a journalist, it was, as we like to call it, catnip, because there was fraud, there were shady players, a lot of con men. A lot of these companies, like I said, had literally nothing to do with cannabis, and but they were trading as public stocks, and so I found that super interesting and started covering them. And then Colorado legalized adult use, and then it was kind of game on. The street, like a lot of mainstream operations, were kind of, we're not really so crazy about this cannabis coverage. You can do it at the end of the day when all your other work's done. And the more I got into it, the more fascinated I became with it. And I really felt like it was going to be the biggest business story of the decade. And I started to shift my focus to just that. And then I kind of got hired away from the street to do a newsletter, and sadly they cut that team like almost as immediately as I went to work for them. And so I was freelancing, and then during that time I realized that there was a real gap in the industry on coverage for cannabis, specifically hard financial news coverage that didn't treat the cannabis industry like a giggle con. Like they were always giggle headlines and weed pun headlines, and they just didn't take it seriously. And I mean, now we know this is a serious industry with some serious dollars being put up in the sales numbers, and so it really deserved that. And that's when I started Green Market Report, which I sold to Crane Communications in 2021, and sadly they closed the title in April of this year. So that's the journey.
Could you buy it back from them?
No, I can't. I should
Yeah.
have had that I should have had that paragraph in my contract. But
Now, you see, the funny thing was, because after I approached you for this interview, I saw that news, and they basically closed it down when the industry bottomed. So, like if you put all your money into MSOS, like when they shut that down, like you would have made a fortune. So,
well, there were other things going on with the company owns like something like 26 B2B titles, and some of their big names were getting crushed by the tariffs. So the tariffs were hitting the automotive industry, Ad Age, and so they were seeing advertising dollars shrink in some real marquee names. We were the newcomers, and we had not made a profit. Every year we were doing better. We were growing by leaps and bounds every year, but we weren't profitable yet. And they kind of had to circle the wagons, and we were the wagon left out. So, and they did say, look, if we thought this administration was going to legalize in the next couple of months, we would absolutely stick with it. But we don't see that. And they're right. It didn't happen. Nothing happened. So as a business person, I understand that decision. As a human, it hurt.
Yeah. I mean, did you feel like it was like your baby?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I poured everything into that. And the hard part to say is I can't really completely blame Crane for shutting it down, because we really struggled to get the industry to support us. I think because our news was not biased and we weren't pay to play, We sometimes, I don't want to say went hard, but we were very honest about companies that didn't behave well. And we didn't shy away from bad news. And so I think that that caused a lot of people in the industry to not want to advertise with us, to not want to support our conferences. And I think, we went to a subscriber-based model, hoping to get enough people to subscribe to help pay for the news. Because we paid people a decent living wage, and that costs. But it costs to get good journalism. We had great investigative journalism, and we just didn't get the subscribers we needed, which, sucks. And even our women's summit, which was very popular and critically acclaimed, we had top female CEOs that would not support that conference. Like, how?
Because of ties to cannabis?
No, because they, look, when you've got a major publicly traded company headed by a woman that doesn't like it if you write anything somewhat perceived to be negative about them, they're like, I don't want to support you. You wrote something that our net losses were bad. Grow up. Like, come on. Like, are you supporting women, or are you on a petty vengeance campaign? Like, that part, I really think if we'd had the subscribers that we needed, and we would have had a real buy-in to our women's summit that was scheduled weeks after they closed us, I think they might have held on a little bit longer. But we couldn't prove to them that the industry was supporting us. People loved reading us. They just didn't want to pay for it.
Yeah, I think you got to go back to them and say, "We're not using this. Let's make a deal." Okay, all right. So, but back to the industry now. Like, how much of a stigma is there still out there? Because even I look at, some of these companies in the cannabis industry, and I'm like, oh, like, this is all just goofy. I see all these, 5-letter ticker symbols, and the financials are all a little wacky. And like, even, I'm a very liberal person on these things, but like, how much stigma is still out there?
I think there is a great deal of stigma still out there. I think, unfortunately, cannabis is getting pulled into the culture wars now. You constantly have these surveys that say this is a bipartisan topic. When you ask Republicans, Democrats, do they want legalized cannabis? They're all like, yes, we do. But then when you get into politics, you suddenly have this split again, where you got the Republicans mostly starting to push back on any kind of legalization. And, that's, I think, hurts it. I will say, just recently, Robinhood took on Glass House Brands as a stop to trade. And I think that's a really great move. And hopefully we'll see more of that, because to your point, when you got everybody trading on the OTC or Canadian exchanges, it makes it a little harder to trade the stocks. And so there's this too much focus on this MSOS ETF. I mean, sadly, it's kind of the one that has survived. We've had so many cannabis ETFs shut down. We don't really have a standard cannabis index that we could all follow. That, I think that's why MSOS has kind of taken that on. But I do think that move by Robinhood might help the situation. Glass House, I was kind of like, I think there could have been better names, but Glass House was the one that pursued it. So,
but I mean, I thought like the floodgates would open because of, Trump posting that video and, RFK behind it. Cause I mean, Trump is so popular with his base. I assumed he could move it forward, but like, do you think it's happening in reality?
No, I have nothing to base this on. My thoughts on that video post, random, out of the blue. My gut, he got paid to do that. It was random. It was out of the blue. There was no more. It came out of nowhere. and then went away just as quick. It was like, what? And of course the stocks popped and everybody was like, oh my God, Trump is like all over cannabis. Well, is he? He just posted this stupid, I don't want to say stupid video. He just posted this video and has not said another word since.
Okay.
And it reminds me of when he jumped into the Florida legislative battle, when earlier in, when he was running for election. Remember that? And he was like, yeah, I'm all for legalizing adult use in Florida. When DeSantis was, pushing back on that. And that was another one of those, where did this come from? Well, I mean, a lot of the chatter was that he got paid to come out and say that.
I think the MSO gang is not going to enjoy this this interview.
My opinion, trust me, I literally gave the disclaimer. Truly my opinion. That the Florida thing, I heard a lot of chatter that he got paid a big sum of money to come out in favor. The video, that is just my gut feeling, because again, it came out of nowhere and then went away just as quickly. So it to me is a pattern, and I that this administration is for sale. But as soon as you start to have some kind of legislation for cannabis, the Republicans come and they shut it down just as fast.
Like it is. So I'll say that was probably the most interesting insight anybody's offered on this podcast since it was launched, because it
I don't have anybody to answer to anymore, so I can freely.
Now, you silly people at Cranes, that this would have generated a lot of traffic. Now, but I mean, it is interesting because Trump, now that I think about it, Trump is vehemently anti-drinking and drugs. Like, I believe he said he's never touched alcohol in his whole life.
Well, there's been plenty of people that said they've seen him drink wine, but he is known for not being a heavy drinker. There, for sure, he is not a Pete Hegseth.
Okay, all right. So, like, I mean, the dream of the industry. I mean, safe banking has been been on the tip of everybody's tongue since Moses wore short pants. But like, do you think it's ever going to happen?
I think if we did ever go to Schedule 3 in a minute, it would happen in a second. It really surprises me that you see, Jamie Dimon coming out so hard against crypto, and then now all of a sudden he's all Mr. Crypto. And like, so you're going to go with crypto over cannabis is a real product with real sales, real jobs, it's real. You're not going to go for that, but you're going to go and work with crypto, which is completely unregulated and is so smoke and mirrors that you're like, okay, Jamie, that's
it's okay. So you're saying that crypto is more smoke and mirrors than cannabis?
You can steal crypto coins out of wallets. You can. I mean, we just had a big crash in crypto. It for sure there's a use for it, I think, but it's highly unregulated, and you don't know. I mean, I've covered lots of crypto fraud stories, and in fact, before the SEC kind of lost their teeth, they had so many crypto investigations going. And then as soon as this administration came in, it was administrative report after administrative announcement saying, we've shut down this investigation, over and over and over. All these investigations got shut down. Okay,
let me play devil's advocate. Could it be a good thing to have something that's completely unregulated? I mean, we'll say it's somewhat regulated now, but as an experiment to see what happens, because, like, people talk about free markets a lot, especially Republicans. There's no such thing as a real free market on earth. as far as I could tell, because there's government interference with all kinds of things. There's a million examples of the government choosing winners and losers. But so, I mean, do you think it could be a good thing to say, okay, you people party and like let the consequences like live with them?
With regards to
crypto.
Yeah. I mean, look, I do own a little bit of crypto. I kind of own it just little tiny bits just to follow it because my curiosity got the best of me. And I was like, you know what? I'll play, but I'm playing with disposable income. I'm not playing with anything big. And I've seen very little come out of it. I mean, I'm not impressed. I am impressed with a cannabis industry that, like I said, has a real product, has real sales, pays taxes, gives people jobs. To me, that is much more worthwhile to a community than some giant, crypto data warehouse that's sucking all the energy off the electric grid. And yeah, you get a few jobs building the warehouse and then all those jobs are gone. And now you have one or two people that walk into that warehouse to make sure everything's right. And then it also sucks up all the water in the area to keep those machines cool. To me, I don't see the payoff to a community with a crypto warehouse versus a cannabis company. I think a cannabis company is way more valuable for a community and a state.
Okay, now is cannabis use increasing? Because the reason I ask is because alcohol is on the decline. So like, is cannabis use still going up?
Oh yeah. I mean, I was just reading about the sales in New York, which is such a difficult market. And they just keep new numbers every month, new sales records every month. I mean, look, we are getting more stores open in New York. So that helps. But it's certainly the stigma of cannabis usage is going down and the availability is increasing. And so I think it's not as big of a deal for people now to bring out at a party a cannabis drink instead of an alcohol drink. And I think that it's definitely growing into acceptance. And then you're also seeing, liquor stores that are carrying these hemp beverages that have like a THC level drink in them. Look at Speck's warehouse down in Texas. They've got a huge inventory of these drinks. So yeah, I definitely see that.
So do you think there could be a tipping point driven strictly by dollars? Because even we get so now let's just take JP Morgan as an example. So Jamie Dimon looks like he flip-flopped when there was financial opportunity. So I would imagine customers of, and I'm a JP Morgan shareholder. Let me be clear. So I'm
a former Bear Stearns employee. So they bought my whole company.
Oh no. Did you get like hosed on your company stock or something?
Dude, I sold that stock at $150 a share.
Oh,
I got out before it crashed.
Oh, congratulations. That is very good news. But I mean, if the alcohol industry is shrinking, the cannabis industry is growing. Do you think at some point, like somebody big picks up the phone and makes the call and says it's time?
You would think. Look at Michigan. They get bigger tax receipts from cannabis than they do alcohol now. And they're not the only state that is hitting that point. Yeah, you would think. And I would think that that's going to be the way to get the Trump administration to roll over. I really thought they would have done it pretty soon. But like I said, it's getting sucked into the culture wars. And if you looked at it as just a dollars and cents decision, it's a no-brainer. Of course. Why wouldn't you do this? You're going to get more banking for the big banks. You're going to get more tax receipts. But like I said, it's stuff that seems normal as getting pulled into culture wars. It's really unfortunate.
Okay, like, what do you think of this sort of, you know what? I'm just going to call it a cult. This MSO gang cult. Listen, every sector, I've been in multiple stock related cults myself. So I'm saying this sort of affectionately, but there is like this rabid group of like cannabis bulls, very loud on Twitter. Like, do you think that they're seeing reality, or is it just like rose colored glasses for them?
You know, when you've got a lot of money tied up into something, it gets very emotional. People get very personal about it. And I think that that's what's happened is people put a lot of money in and lost a lot of money. Maybe on paper, maybe it's not real losses yet. It's paper losses. And they don't want to either one, admit they were wrong or had bad timing. And then they're hoping to maybe recover some of those losses. So they don't want to hear anything negative. And God forbid anyone say anything negative, and they're just going to pounce on you. But yeah, it's kind of entertaining it's kind of entertaining to watch the Ben Kovler exchange with the MSOS managers. It's like, Ben, don't you have a lot more to do with your time? Like, why isn't Ben spending time trying to get GTI on Robinhood instead of going after, these MSOS guys? I mean, but yeah, I mean, we used to take some of that heat at GMR when if we wrote anything, God forbid, that was honest about somebody's earnings. It was, oh, you're being owned by the shorts and you're pay to play and you're getting paid on the side to write this bad thing to send the stocks down. And like, people
listen, people love a conspiracy theory. It is much more appealing than hearing the truth. I mean, I did that when I was writing about stocks a lot publicly. Even if I was positive, somebody would write in and accuse me of working for whatever hedge fund. And I was like, if the hedge fund knew who I was, like that would even be a miracle.
Yeah, if I wrote something positive, I was a pumper, and if I wrote something negative, I was owned by the shorts. I was like, I remember one CEO got pissed at me for a story that it wasn't even that bad. It was just like, hey, here's the earnings. And not long after that, we followed up with an actually really positive story about the guy, totally unrelated to the earnings. Just, hey, they're doing this thing, and this is a really cool thing that they're doing. Nope, he was still pissed at me for that one story. It's like, oh, are you kidding? Like, grow up, man.
It's also hilarious because I've had the situation where if I wrote something positive about a company, somebody would say, oh, you're in the pocket of a hedge fund or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But then I would also get a message from an actual hedge fund explaining to me what an idiot I was. So, it's like, you can never, what I didn't understand was that all criticism and hate is a form of praise. And,
I had one, and it's interesting because I interviewed some really big hitters, before I focused just on cannabis, and I would talk to them at the floor of the exchange, and I would say right off the bat, look, I have to ask you about this uncomfortable situation. And they would be like, that's fine. I'm going to tell you no comment. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'm just telling you up front. I have to ask you this question. And so these were trained and mature, seasoned CEOs that knew these questions were coming. I remember talking to a cannabis CEO, and he said one of the nicest things to me. He goes, look, if I'm ever scared of a question from you, I have no business being a CEO. And there are so many cannabis CEOs that they're just not that seasoned to be able to deal with the press and be able to answer a hard question from a journalist, which they should. They should.
Well, I guess a lot of them haven't. Maybe they just haven't been through fire, or also I think since it's such like an insular industry that they're getting so much positive feedback, like they're not really exposed to the real world. Like they're not, as far as I know, like the Wall Street Journal, I'm just like making this up hypothetically, like could write a like something negative about OpenAI or NVIDIA or something, and that just becomes considered completely normal. Like Jensen Huang's not going to be having a meltdown, like, but maybe they're just these smaller companies, they just don't know how the world works. But I mean, isn't it interesting how like a lot of CEOs and powerful people, some of them have awfully thin skin.
Yes, some like Mr. Musk, who I have actually interviewed. I did actually interview Elon Musk years ago when Tesla went public.
How did that go?
Well, he was very humble back then because he had lost a lot of money. And you're very humble when you don't have a lot of money. And he threw everything he had into Tesla. And at that time, it was all his money. And it wasn't going anywhere. And so he was very charming. He was very candid. He is nothing like he is today. But again, now he's one of the world's, wealthiest men. But look at this. I mean, you've got, GTI, one of the best cannabis run companies out there. Huge, great products, well run. Stock is meh. And you got Tesla, who has come out and said, "Oh, that robot idea we had, yeah, we're not doing that anymore." And the stock just still keeps going up. And it's like, okay, you have a CEO who is busy running around all over the place doing all kinds of crazy things and is becoming one of these like, Howard Hughes wackadoo guys that's super rich and just getting weird. And the company is not doing well. Tesla is not being run well. The sales are down. They're coming up with these discounted cars. It's just it's like I said, they were doing robots. Oh, now we're not doing robots. You would have thought that the stock would have been crushed on news like that. And no, it's still doing okay. So it's sometimes these things, as someone who has been in the finance world and covered it, sometimes these stock moves don't really follow logic. And that's unfortunate. You wish the stock would go up when they have good sales and good numbers and then go down when they screw up. But sometimes it's just caught up in crazy trading and retail trading, and it doesn't make sense. And to your point, as we were talking about the MSOS, passionate traders, you got the same thing with Tesla and Apple. You have some of these, NVIDIA, you have some of these very, emotion driven stocks that trade on emotion more than numbers.
Well, I mean, if everything made sense, would we even have anything to write about?
Correct.
I mean, you think about all these. Like I had an interview. I interviewed like a Wall Street Journal. I'm sorry, a New York Times columnist before, and like we were talking about how it does seem like the number of crazy people, and I just use that as like a blanket word, or the number of characters like in the business world, and in politics also, just keeps growing. Like I think in particular, Elon Musk and like Alex Palantir, like the Overton window is changing very, very quickly. And I think in 10 or 20 years, I think a lot of CEOs, they're going to look more like reality TV characters.
Yeah. I mean, do you love a Tim Cook? I mean, look what he did with that. Everybody thought when Steve Jobs died that Tim Cook was never going to be able to transform or keep Apple going. And when Jobs died, what was it, a $300 million company? Now it's $1 trillion company. Like Tim Cook did that. And Tim Cook is the most boring kind of CEO, but that's what you want. You want I prefer a boring CEO. I prefer a quiet Jamie Dimon. I would rather have someone focused on doing the job at hand versus being a media whore and wanting, very, vacuous attention. But
I think like I got to push back on that a little bit because I think it depends on where a company is in its life cycle because when Steve Jobs sort of came back to Apple, like Apple needed a revolutionary to turn things around because the company was stuck. It had like dog shit products. So I think it needed a crazy, because it was going to go nothing anyway. So you need a crazy man, I think, to turn it around. And then listen, like this is like people talk about pharmaceuticals. This is the ultimate pharmaceutical. Like people, I am going to be paying $50 or $100 a month or whatever it is for the rest of my life because I can't live without, and there's a billion people around the world like just like me. So like, I mean, a company like Apple, it needs stability, and a bank especially needs to have or at least a normal appearing person needs to be run a bank. Like, could you imagine Elon Musk running a bank?
No. Well, I mean, he did have PayPal, so.
But even PayPal had to be like throwing itself up against like a wall of regulations and figuring out how to get around them and basically fight a system. Now,
and people use PayPal, or do they use Venmo now? Let's think about that one. So he started out with a decent product, and then I tried PayPal for a while when I was, doing GMR. It was terrible. PayPal sucked. It was, I got hacked multiple times. I had so many problems with PayPal. I mean, look, this is long after Elon Musk has been out of PayPal. But, the product became awful. And then you had Venmo sweep in and just steal the show. I think that visionaries are clearly important. But I think you also need that technocrat to really keep your eye on the company and the numbers. Vision is only going to take you so far.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up PayPal though. It is funny because like I've been involved in a lot of online businesses, and it is shocking how many people demand to pay in PayPal and nothing else.
And you have Zelle. I mean, Zelle is
there are a lot of people. It might be the same people who still have their AOL email addresses from 1997. There are a lot of people.
That is true.
My company, I could actually pull on a customer service or a salesperson right now to explain how many times like somebody said, I want to use PayPal. And we're like, it's just $40. Just like use your Visa card. I want PayPal.
Well, and look at cannabis, MasterCard and Visa have said a million times, absolutely do not use our product for your cannabis transactions. And I can I'm going to a dispensary this afternoon to buy some stuff, and they will do my debit card and it'll round up and they'll give me back some change. And it is clearly going through Visa. And I know this is a workaround. I know it's kind of illegal, but all the dispensaries, almost all of them, if they don't have an ATM machine in their lobby, they're doing that workaround. And every now and then Visa and MasterCard get all uppity and say, shut that down. And then they ignore it again.
I'm so, did they ever do anything like you pay $40 for a bag of potato chips, but it actually comes with like a bunch of weed? Like,
They used to do that in the bodegas in the city, like years ago. You go into these bodegas that would have like 3 candles and 2 loaves of bread on the shelves, and then you go buy something, and they would slip you.
Okay, but speaking of retail, why don't we yet have a Chipotle of cannabis yet, or like a sporting goods of cannabis and psychedelics? Like, because I do think that would help a lot. Like a retail chain people could see that was like run well and operated well and had like a big market cap, was basically just run professionally. Like, do you think we're ever going to get that?
I mean, we do have that somewhat. We do have some of the big companies that are in multiple states, MSO, but it becomes, I think it becomes a scalability issue because you have to set up so many separate operations in each individual state that overhead ends up not paying off. Would you want to be in Vermont? No, you can only have one store in Vermont. You can only have one license.
In
So
Vermont, of all places, Vermont.
yeah, well, it's a little state, and so they wanted to keep the MSOs out. They wanted to keep it mom and pop. But then you in the Northeast, yeah, you've got you can go to a rise in several of the states. There's look at Planet 13. They're in Nevada and Florida, and so yeah, you are seeing a little bit of that, but I think because we don't have a national standard for this industry, that it just makes it not work for the big companies to be that large. I mean, look at acreage. Back in the day, they like, oh, we're the largest, we're in the most states, and that used to be the big measure back in the beginning was, oh, we're in the most states, and then so many of those companies realized we're losing our butts trying to be in all these states, and that's when they started selling off.
Okay, but do you ever think there's going to be a time where we see Starbucks or Walmart selling cannabis? Because I mean, if I can
Yeah.
go to Walmart and buy like a bottle of vodka and a shotgun, like
I mean, you've got that in Canada, where you've got big chains in Canada, and that's because they gobbled up the smaller operators. So you certainly have that in Canada. I think that going forward, if we do legalize, that yes, it's going to get commoditized, and I think we'll see something similar to what we see in the tobacco industry or the alcohol industry. Is whoever's got to deal with 7-Eleven or Circle K, whatever, that there will be 4 or 5 brands that will be behind the counter, and then the dispensaries will become like the microbrews of today, so that if you're not happy with what is at the counter at the convenience store closest to you, that's going to sell the Budweiser of cannabis, if you will, if you're not happy with that and want something better, then you will go to the dispensary and get what you want. I think you'll end up with those two markets where you'll have those big mass cannabis products that'll be like the Budweisers, and then you'll have the nice specialty dispensaries. So I think that, and I think those two can coexist. I think you can have the dispensary where I want a specific product that is not sold at the convenience store, so I will go to that dispensary and make that effort. But then you're going to have a lot of people like, we'll just get some pre-rolls at, while we're getting some gas before we go to the beach.
okay, so so we're going to turn on the time machine. If we go 10 years in the future, where do you think the industry will be?
Ooh, 10 years. I definitely think we will be legalized at some level in 10 years. I think it will cause a consolidation. I think we will have big, massive names, and maybe they will be independent. Maybe they will end up getting owned by an alcohol or tobacco behemoth. But I think there will still be a market for some small local brands. I think people will want some small local operators. And I think the states are going to fight really hard to keep that, because, it definitely, like looking at New York, it has certainly helped some depressed areas, whether they're urban depressed areas or rural depressed areas, with new jobs and new operations that didn't exist there before, that I think the states want to try to hold on to some of that. Like I said, it's good for the community and they're great jobs. So I do think that I think we're going to see that bifurcation of the big mass big big corporate mass cannabis over here, and then specialty cannabis over here. So you're going to have the Budweisers over here, and then you're going to have the local microbrews over here. And I think that, to me, is how it's going to start to play out. You don't really see that in tobacco. In tobacco, it's just, Marlboro or whoever. And then there's no craft tobacco. It doesn't exist. But we do have that in alcohol. And I think that, to me, is how we're going to end up in 10 years from now.
Okay. All right, Deborah, before we close out, are you ready for some rapid fire questions?
Oh gosh. Okay.
You have no choice. It's too late. You already agreed by coming up. Okay. What is your favorite Wall Street or finance related movie?
Oh, Trading Places.
What is your favorite breakfast food?
Yogurt.
Who is your favorite musical artist?
I'm sorry?
Who is your favorite musical artist?
I have so many. But I did just go see Neil Young in concert, and so loving Neil Young.
How was that?
Man, he's still fighting the protests. He's still fighting the power, and I kind of love that.
How old is he now? Is he
He's old as dirt, man. But here's what he did at the venue, and this is super cool, is he refused to sell corporate beer. The only beer that could be sold at the venue was local craft beer. They had to completely change all the vendors at the venue to only have local beers. And I was like, yeah, man, that's so cool.
Is he dealing with is he going through Live Nation? Because I know they're like the Gestapo with enforcing rules so they can suck up every penny out of everything they can.
I don't think so. Like he has rules around scalping his tickets and stuff like that. So he won't allow that. But I listen to 80s music, 90s music. I'm all over the place. So.
Okay, and Deborah, if people want to get in touch with you or see what you're up to, where should they go?
I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me there. I'm also on Twitter under Wall and Broad.
All right. I will put a link down in the description below so you can follow Deborah. So Deborah, have a wonderful day. And everybody who's been watching and listening, please like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff, and have a wonderful day.